السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So whilst we are trying to get hold and get in touch with our Shaykh, the Allama Ubaid bin Abdullah Al-Jabari, حفظه الله ta'ala, we have to be a little bit patient because of his health and his age. So we're still trying to make that link, inshallah. So up until then, we just need to be patient, barakallahu feekum. But in the meantime, up until we pray, let me just deal with a few questions as quickly as I can, inshallah. Again, I'll try to be short with the answers, so just to get the issue across, bi-idhnillah. So there's a question here: how do we deal with children who are young and have tantrums? Then the term tantrum, I suppose you mean here that you tell them to do something and they refuse, and then you tell them to do it again and they shout or they scream or they cry and so on. Then upon the parent is to be patient first and foremost, and every parent knows how their children are, and children respond differently to different triggers, meaning from their parents. So you may have a daughter who, for example, doesn't throw tantrums and she doesn't scream. She will listen to you straight away. Or that you may have one child who may not listen to you and another child who also doesn't listen to you. But you deal with one differently to the other because one of them responds differently to the other. So it's a matter of really, tailoring your response to the children in that which fits them. And that takes time, and it takes patience, and it takes, looking at them. And looking at those things that they respond to. Some children respond, for example, to reward. Other children respond to punishment. So it just depends with each child what they respond to. And the whole idea of, this concept that children, that they have a tantrum and it's hard to control them, then actually, I don't believe that there is any child that cannot be controlled. Allahu a'lam. That our children in general, if not in totality, that as long as they are raised from the beginning to respect and to honor their parents, even begrudgingly, they will listen. As long as that tarbiyah begins at a very early age. So the key is early tarbiyah right from the very beginning. Don't wait till they're about 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you decide, well, actually, I've just figured out that they don't listen to me. Actually, that type of tarbiyah or that type of recognizing the character of your children should be very early on, right as young as 2 and 3. So they begin to understand from a very early age that mother and father are to be obeyed and they are to be listened to. And that is done, of course, in the very early years of the child through love and affection and play and drawing clear boundaries that they are not allowed to cross. So when they know from a very early age, even as young as 1 and 2, that there are boundaries that they are not supposed to cross. They are not supposed to scream, for example, in the supermarket because they want a particular sweet or a particular toy. That you let them know that this is unacceptable. Not that you give in, because when you give in, then they know that screaming and shouting equals reward. The more that I scream and shout, the more likelihood there is of me getting the toy or the sweet. So sometimes, as embarrassing as it may be, that you do not respond to the demands of children when they throw a tantrum. But rather, it is better that when they do something that is of value, such as they were kind to someone, or that they prayed, or that they did something of excellence and generosity, that you reward them from yourself without them even asking. So then they start drawing links between good behavior and reward. So I didn't ask for this toy, but I behaved in a good manner, and I received the toy anyway. And actually, every time I scream or I cry for something, I don't get a response. In fact, I'm refused. So then, what they do is that they link the tantrum or the screaming or the crying and the hardship that they give to their mother and father, that they link that to no response. That this equals 0 response. I will not get what I ask for when I scream and shout and become obstinate. But however, if I behave well without even me asking, I'm offered. So children are very good at drawing those links, just like the rest of us in reality. That if I behave in a certain way, I get. When I don't behave in a certain way, I don't get. And consistency is extremely important, that you are very consistent. That no means no. And screaming and shouting and crying and sulking will not change that. And they have to know that mom and dad, they are united and they will not change. So it's not that I'll go to mom and I'll get it as long as I scream and shout, but I know that if I go to dad, I will not get it, even if I scream and shout. There must be uniformity between the parents in their responses to their children. Barakallahu feekum. You mentioned that the niqab is not wajib. Then how can people say it is wajib? Why? Because there is an opinion, which is a minority opinion amongst the fuqaha and the scholars, because the jumhur of Ahlul Ilm, from the Salaf of this ummah, and the fuqaha as a whole, even though there may be some one and two in minority amongst the Salaf anyway, that held that the niqab is mandatory, meaning there's a small minority that held it to be an obligation. But the vast majority of the scholars and the fuqaha and the jumhur of the scholars of the past, they held the niqab. This is just from a viewpoint of the scholarly opinions. Of course, the hadith are clear for those who ponder over those hadith and they look at the authenticity of those hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ permitted the women to uncover their faces. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted the women, for example, at Hajj. Because the niqab, of course, the woman cannot tie a niqab whilst she is in the state of ihram. But even outside of ihram, there occurs the hadith of Bilal radiallahu anhu at the time of Eid, that the Prophet ﷺ commanded the women to donate and give in charity and save themselves from the hellfire. And a woman, she stood up, and they could see that she had dark cheeks, and she was standing and she gave in sadaqah. And likewise, the woman after the stoning of the Jamara, that there was a woman. And one of the companions who was sitting behind the Prophet ﷺ upon the riding beast, he was looking at her and she was looking at him because she wasn't wearing niqab. And this was after the state of ihram. And likewise the hadith of Asma bint Abi Bakr, reported in the Sunnah, that is authentic, that the Prophet ﷺ said to his sister-in-law, Asma, she was the sister of Aisha radiallahu anha, that I should not see any part of you except for this and this. And he pointed towards his face and towards his hands. So this is what is allowed for the woman to show. However, some of the scholars, that they use the generality of the ayah in the Quran about the women covering, and they say this also, the tafsir of this ayah, according to some of the mufassirin, that it implies the covering of the face. But actually there is no mention of obligation. And this is why Shaykh Al-Albani, rahimahullah ta'ala, the Shaykh Al-Albani's qawl in this era, his meaning, his bahth, his research into this arena of the niqab is actually probably the strongest in this time, because he has gathered the aqwal of the Salaf, of this ummah, the fuqaha and the muhaddithin. He has looked at all of the different chains of narration, and he has discussed it in various writings. From them, the Jilbab al-Mar'atul Muslima, in that book, he mentions that the niqab is something that is highly recommended, and then he brings evidences to show that it is highly recommended. But as for wujub, as for its obligation, then that is not established. And then he brings narrations to show that. So when he was responded to, and there was some response from some of the scholars of Saudi Arabia, from them Imam al-Tuwajiri and others, and also Al-Ansari, Shaykh Al-Ansari, that when they responded to him, then Shaykh Al-Albani responded back to them with an even more robust response in his book, Rad al-Mufhim. And when one refers back to them, actually the room for maneuver for those who say that the niqab is wajib actually becomes a very, very tight place for maneuverability. Because in reality, if one looks at the writings of Shaykh Al-Albani in this particular issue, one cannot walk away except to know that the early Salaf, the likes of Malik ibn Anas, the likes of Imam Abu Hanifa and other than them, Imam Shafi'i, the Shafi'iyya, the Hanabila and other than them, that they did not hold the niqab to be wajib, and the hadith in that regard established. Allahu a'lam. So the niqab, in the most correct opinion of the scholars, it is not obligatory. Na'am. Is talking or communicating via WhatsApp and other platforms where you are not speaking directly, meaning that you're not speaking verbally or vocally to the opposite sex, to look for a potential person to gauge in terms of characteristics for marriage? then is that permissible? Then the answer is no. Avoid that, because that is a gateway to fitna. And it's a clear pathway to fitna. And a person who says, well, actually, is it possible that a person may be able to communicate and they don't fall into fitna? But that is the exception to the rule. The actual norm is that when you start communicating with the opposite sex, usually those people have access to this type of social media or use this type of social media in terms of seeking a partner or gauging the potential for that partner to become a wife or to become a husband. Then the vast majority of them are young. And they communicate with each other without the knowledge of the guardian and without a person who is older being involved. So when that happens, then shaitan is the third. Because you are now communicating just you and her. So that opens an opportunity, because you are young, and the hormones in the body are wreaking havoc in that girl or boy. So then shaitan nudges them. Ask her this. Why don't you just ask her that? Inshallah, with a good intention, ask her what she likes wearing. Ask her with a good intention, so you can't hide. Or shaitan encourages you, even with that good intention, to ask her searching questions. So you're not really gauging her for marriage. It becomes more like titillation. So avoid it, barakallahu feekum. And you should not be communicating with the opposite sex by WhatsApp. This is not the same as a sister calling a sheikh. That's a completely different kettle of fish, because there is no communication with the sheikh for any marriage purposes. He's asking, phoning a question, ya sheikh, is riba halal? Can I take a student loan? That's different. But now the issue is here that a person enters into the realm of social media and private messaging and these different types of chat forums, whether it be WhatsApp or whether it be, one of the other forums are out there, that now you're opening a door for shaitan to come and destroy you. And this will end up in you regretting. So save yourselves the regret. There are facilities and avenues that you can use that are easier, better, nobler, more chaste and honorable, that will protect your honor. So for example, a young sister, her father has no concern for her finding a husband. Well, you do what you want to do. I'm too busy at work. And, anyway, what's all this, this Wahhabi Salafi stuff about you can't go and find your own boy? Go find him. So she's stuck. But she comes to the durus. Who does she see at the durus? Older sisters. Right? And those sisters, they have children. So she says, auntie or sister, you're my older sister, my father, this is what, he's not really being very helpful. My brothers aren't practicing and, they got girlfriends themselves and I don't really have any avenue to find a husband. Can you, sister, help me? Do you know someone? Or does your husband know someone? I'm 19 years old or 18 years old. My father is not going to help me because he said he's not interested and he thinks that I should be, 36 and, get 2 PhDs and a master's and, get myself a good job and so on and, and then after that I can, but really I'm ready to get married. Can you help me? So now that sister, and they are, alhamdulillah, we have good sisters in the community, in our various communities in the UK, they can help you. And find someone who's suitable. When that person is found who is suitable, then that man or that boy, that you can start through the sister, ask questions, with regard to his age, his work. So he's not communicating with her directly, but through that person. And eventually, it reaches the father. That, alhamdulillah, there's someone who seeks my hand in marriage. I haven't met him. I haven't spoken to him. There's been no WhatsApp, no social media, but through an elder sister in the community. So now he comes knocking on your father's door. Alhamdulillah. It's better that way. It's better that way. Now, obviously, if you're a convert to Islam or a revert, whichever term you prefer to use, that if you have reverted to Islam or converted to Islam, then your guardianship obviously is difficult because your father cannot be your guardian if he's a non-Muslim. So now the guardianship goes to whom? It goes to the Islamic Center. So in Birmingham, in our community, it would be the masjid here. And whoever is in charge of the masjid at the moment is myself and Abu Hakim or Abu Idris. So one of us would take on the role of guardianship, but that doesn't mean that we replace your father. Right? So, you can't come, well, can you just, buy my groceries for me and, can you travel with me? Are you my mahram? No, we're not we're not mahram to you. And we are not your fathers. But just for the purpose of marriage, that so long as that responsible person in the community, that sister and her husband, have, checked out the credentials of that young brother, and they are satisfied that he is good, then at the point of marriage, yes, we can step in as guardians, because you've done all the work in the background. Right? No harm. But be very careful, because the amount of corruption in this society, then it's almost like stifling upon young people. What do we do? Because there is, of course, a desire to get married. There is desire for the opposite sex, because, we're human. And younger people have a greater desire for marriage. As we get older, then it's easier to control. And people settle down. You have children, you have grandchildren, you have your wife, and you're settled. So all of those, those passions of youth won't be in that person as much as they are in the young person. So that young person needs to control themselves. It's not easy, but you need to take control of your nafs. Right? If you're able to, Prophet ﷺ said, those of you who are able to fast, ability here meaning that you're able to provide, you are able to look after them, and you're mature enough, then marry. If you are able, those amongst you who are able to marry, then marry. And if you are not able to get married, then fast. For indeed, it is a shield, meaning it is a shield from lewd behavior. Naam. If someone wanted to marry one of our sisters, meaning a blood sister, then what type of question would you ask him? Then, in reality, is what any other father wants for his daughter. What do you want for your daughter? Someone who is religious, of course, Salafi, upon the Sunnah. You want someone who can provide for her and look after her and not put her into poverty. No father wants to see his daughter in poverty, especially after he's raised her and he's provided for her and he's fed her and he's clothed her and he's educated her and he's spent from his wealth upon her. So why would he now release her from the house to go and put her in poverty? Right? So the one who is looking after your daughter, he must be able to provide for her. He must be responsible, meaning that he's a person who cares about where his wife goes and who she sits with. So he's a person of honor. Right? He's a person who does not have deficiencies, meaning that he's not, he's not schizophrenic, for example, or a psychopath or a sociopath. He's not psychotic. He's not going to, he's not in the habit of killing the neighbor's cats and stuff. All right? There's no mental issue with him. All right? He's not argumentative. He has respect for elders. He's not a person that you find in every dars. He's the first one to start arguing with the speaker. But rather he speaks with ihtiram and honor and respect. He respects elders. When you look at his family, he comes from a family, even if it is a single parent, that the mother is respectful and she's an honorable person. Or if the parents are married one to another, that it is a stable family, even if they are Christian. Right? So even if mum and dad are Christians, but if you look at them, actually, even as Christians, they're good-mannered, they're truthful, they don't lie. They don't fornicate, they're not, they don't sell, heroin on the street corner. Right? So you look at the background in terms of the parents, because obviously the tarbiyah of the awlad comes from the parents. So if the mother, even if it is a single parent, doesn't necessitate that in every situation, having a single mother, the children are going to be bad. No, it's not always the case. Because a single mother, her husband has divorced her or her husband has died, that it's possible that she has raised her children in the best possible way. Imam al-Bukhari was raised just by his mother, for example. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ was raised by his grandfather and then by his uncle. So it is not the case that just because mother and father aren't present, they're necessarily going to be bad, but it is worth looking at the environment in which they were raised. These are all factors, and we mentioned some of them in the dars yesterday. So these are the types of things that you need to ask. Is there, are there issues? I mean, does he have a criminal record? Obviously if he was before he started practicing, maybe he had some, he may have been with the wrong company and he got caught out and maybe, he got cautioned by the police or he ended up with some sort of criminal record. But actually, ever since he's been practicing, he's been straight. Alhamdulillah, good company. So ever since he's been practicing for the last 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years, alhamdulillah, there's no problem with the law. he wasn't caught breaking into a house 3 months ago, for example. Because that's not the type of person that you want your daughter marrying, a burglar. Well, what's your occupation? I burgle homes. It's not the type of thing that you want for your daughter. So you have to be very, very cautious, because this is your treasure that you're giving away. You know how much you love your children. You know when they became sick, how tearful you were that your child is suffering with a temperature or with a fever. So when the child had a fever, mom and dad stayed awake with the child. When she was ill, they were ill, in essence. Why would you now not care where this daughter goes, or where where your child goes? Is it permissible to work as an accountant? Then yes, as long as that you are doing accountancy work that is halal, for a halal business, and you do not deal in riba, and you do not do accounting for people who deal in riba, right? Except to extinguish it. So if you're aiding someone to extinguish the riba and get rid of the riba, then this is ta'awun al birri wa taqwa. As for a company that deals in riba and they're trying to maximize the high interest account, and they make contracts within which there is interest and usury, then no, it is not permissible to be an accountant in that field. But there are a lot of good Muslim accountants out there who do not deal in riba. So it is permissible to work as an accountant as long as the riba and the haram is left out, which means that anyone who works as an accountant must know the ahkam and the rulings and the regulations of buying and selling in Islam. Because if you're doing accountancy work, you need to know what is halal and haram in terms of purchasing and buying and selling. It's not just a matter of, he works, he doesn't take interest from the bank, because certain types of transactions include riba, like late fees and so on. Because the asl of riba in Jahiliyyah was that a man would give another man, for example, 20 dirhams, and he would say, right, 3 months, I want 20 dirhams back. He says, okay, you gave me 20 dirhams, 3 months time, 20 dirhams back. He goes back in 3 months, he said, either give me my 20 dirhams or give me 5 dirhams on top. Riba. Right? That's riba. So there needs to be an understanding of a person who enters into the field of accountancy, a good understanding of the Islamic legislations and rulings of buying and selling. As a science teacher, would it be recommended to call the parents of our Muslim children, advising them that advising the children of the importance of knowing the fallacy of scientific theories? I don't know if that's allowed in, is that a safeguarding issue that you start? I don't know whether, if under the regulations and the law of this country, can a teacher independently outside of the school start getting telephone numbers of parents and ringing them individually? I don't know. But in generality, what is allowed for a teacher to do in a lesson, even in a science lesson, that he informs the children that this is a theory that has been propounded by some people, but the religions, they reject it, including Islam, Judaism and Christianity. They reject these theories, but these are theories that are put into science books, but they are what it is, theories. If that teacher has the strength and the quwwah and the ability to now expand upon that and teach the children that actually, as Muslims, it is not permissible to believe this, because this is actually something that is a fallacy and it is false and so on, then yes, this is better. This is better. If you know the parents personally, meaning that on a level of, socially you know them, then inform them. But the thing is, you as a teacher shouldn't be teaching as a fact that which is fiction, because evolution is fiction. The concept of the Big Bang, and that the universe beginning at the Big Bang, and existence itself beginning at what they refer to as the Big Bang, is a fallacy, and it is a fiction. It is a fantasy. It did not occur. It did not occur in the manner that they claim, that things are created from, that they came into existence by themselves without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creating them. So you as a teacher, you have to understand that you cannot teach fiction and kufr as a fact. Right? But you can say, in this science book, they claim that this is what they believe, that this is a theory. However, as Muslims, you are not allowed to believe this, because we believe that Allah created everything, that Allah created the universe, Allah created the sun and the moon and the stars and the valleys and the rivers and the trees and the animals and mankind, that Allah created Adam, the first man, with his own 2 hands. So man did not evolve from an ape into a human being. He didn't wake up one day as an ape, and then he had a relationship with another ape, and that ape gave birth to a human being. It didn't happen. Right? It didn't happen. It didn't happen in one generation. It did not happen over several generations. It did not happen over hundreds of generations. And the ape did not now give birth to another ape with less hair, then which gave birth to another ape with longer fingers, who gave birth to another ape with, you know, with the nose and the ears in a slightly different place, you know, because an ape would look at that and think it's disabled. Right? So it didn't happen like that, barakallahu feekum. And we don't believe in that. And anyone who believes that this is what happened, then that person has left the fold of Islam. He is a kafir outside the fold of Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran, why do you, O Iblis, refuse to bow down to the one whom I created with my own two hands? Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam informed us in a hadith in Sahih Muslim and in Bukhari and other places that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam from clay and He molded him. And Allah subhanahu and many of the Mufassirin and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum mention how Adam alayhi salam was in the form of in a clay form, that he was placed in the garden, and Iblis used to walk around him, and he used to look upon him and think that he was hollow because there's nothing inside him at that time. That is not evolution. That is Allah creating Adam in the Quran. That why do you refuse to bow down to the one whom I created with my own two hands? Allah created Adam with His own two hands, and He created him out of clay. This is what we believe. Anyone who comes along and says, well, actually, that's not true, because they came from monkeys or apes, then that is kufr. So you as a teacher are responsible how you teach. And this is why it's probably better that you teach in Islamic schools and give your energy into the Muslim communities and to Islamic schools. And the more Muslims that teach in Islamic schools, the more likelihood there is that Muslim parents will send their children to Islamic schools, because now you have a qualification. You are a qualified teacher. You have a degree. You have a postgraduate certificate of education, or you have a bachelor's of education. So now you should use that energy in Islamic schools, into schools of Sunnah and Salafiyah, and say, okay, I know that I may not get the same salary as a state school, but alhamdulillah, my religion will be safe, and I'll be aiding the community, and I'll be supporting the Muslim ummah and Muslim societies and the next generation. So this is how you should think when it comes to Muslim schools, barakallahu feekum. This is how you should think, and this should be your outlook, so that the Muslim communities are strengthened. You go and teach in a state school, then how do the Muslims benefit from that? Unless Muslim parents send their children there, but then you are in a straitjacket because you can only teach what they're telling you to teach. And when Christmas comes, you know what happens. You're in a school where they're all singing Christmas carols. Right? And when Diwali comes, then they're celebrating the Hindu festivals, and you're just sitting there in the staff room with your head down. Why? Because you have no honor in places like that, and you have no quwwah, you have no strength. And it's surprising, barakallahu feekum, that many of our community, brothers and sisters, that they have education, and they have degrees, and they have postgraduate certificates of education, and they have bachelors of education. Yet, they will not come and help the Salafi schools and the Salafi institutions because they get, £3 an hour extra in the state school. Benefit your community. Yes, you have to make sacrifices just like we make sacrifices. You have to make sacrifices to support our community. Because if we don't make this ta'awun and cooperate with each other and aid the Islamic schools, the Salafi schools, the Sunnah schools, the schools of Ahlul Sunnah in Stoke, in Birmingham, in Manchester, in other places, in Slough and other places, then how is our community going to build? So sometimes you hear, mashallah, in Birmingham, we've got 50 and 60 educated teachers in East London, in Manchester and other places. And they're all teaching in state schools. Why do you teach it? Because I want more money. So where's your sacrifice? Where's your sacrifice for the da'wah? Where's your sacrifice for your children? Where's the sacrifice for the next generation? Oh, we just leave that to Abu Hakim and Abu Idris and Abu Iyad. Right, I just want my salary so I can get my new car and I can get my new sofa and I can go to DFS and get that leather sofa that my wife has always been nagging me about. Then what about the Muslim communities? What about our schools? You have to think what you can do. Aid the community where you can. Barakallahu feekum. Upon that, we're going to pray now. Straight after the prayer, inshallah, we'll have that link with our Shaykh, بإذن Shaykh Ubaid Al-Jabri. حفظه الله تعالى وجزاكم الله خيرا وسبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت استغفرك وأتوب إليك.